What do we fill extra time with? Ourselves? Other people? TikTok? I seldom share anything on social media. I never know if what I post is going to have a shelf life or be worth anybody's time, especially mine. And social media tends to lock the public's idea of you, which I generally like to remain ambiguous. Plus, I acknowledge my inescapable cheese factor, so I limit. However, like many others, I've had a lot on my mind, no touching of the face. And I talked myself out of sharing it when the lockdown went into effect. So now I'm spitting, and I'll basically be reading from my journal entry. So right now, the world has a common enemy, which has put most of the planet in the same boat. So in addition to fear, uncertainty, job leave, and fighting this thing together, the one thing that the coronavirus has given most of us at home in quarantine is time. Not free time, mind you, but even after all the adjustments, we have been given time that we wouldn't have had before. The lack of commuting, working a full shift, lunch breaks, networking, all have added up to a certain amount of empty time that's begging to be filled. And what I've noticed online and in social media is the bipolarity of bored versus not bored, and the gray people in between. I'll be frank, it's difficult for me to understand how such a large amount of people could go bored in this day and age. Having said that, I am also aware that I am my own product of a very financially humble and dangerously awkward childhood, brought on by constant relocating and severe friendship droughts. And with my reading comprehension, not even books were a comfort. So in situations like that, you kind of find a way to be your own best friend. Yes, I'm one of those people, shut up. For me, that was falling deep into movies and my gargantuous imagination. And I admit, in times like these, having said background comes in handy. So I'm taking this time to reflect and see how that's worked for me. However, if you are struggling with boredom, as much as I don't understand it, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. If anything, it may be optimistic evidence that you didn't have a lonely childhood. But if you are one of the many who have been given this extra time, why not find out why you're bored and explore that part of you? Maybe you are an individual who needs a full schedule or that social consistency. If so, maybe now is a good time to reflect on if how that's worked for you. Has it proven productive for you, for your career, your family? Has it been healthy? Does it propel your goals? Just to be clear, I'm indifferent to your answers. If it's all worked for you, great. If you think there's room for improvement, great. However, so far, I've seen so many people online for many different reasons who are genuinely struggling on what to do with themselves during this isolation. Which brings up a good point. It's important that we don't confuse boredom with cabin fever. Two very different things. Both are valid, but they can have very different remedies, and sometimes that takes some searching because those remedies are extremely subjective. Now, as much as hermiting is an old acquaintance of mine, I still experience many kinds of cabin fever, and not just being cooped up in a room. Sometimes that room is toxic people. Sometimes it's eating the same food over and over because last paycheck wasn't so good. Sometimes it's your job. Oh my God, my 20s, stop touching your face. But you get the idea. And in this situation, I think it's not only a possible case of cabin fever, but this virus has taken away that sense of simple freedom to leave our homes without any worry or consequence. So yeah, in that way, I concur with that irritability. Everybody's mental stamina has a limit. Now, flipping the coin, we have the other half. The individuals who are anything but bored. We are talking about filling time with puzzles, video games, apps, binge watching, FaceTiming, the works. And I'll admit, it sounds pretty bomb. I mean, it keeps you occupied and it makes the time go by faster. Let's face it, most of us are addicted to being occupied, and boy, do we feel it whenever that plug is pulled. And now, most of us have been given this extra time. So here's where I ask a serious question about something that initially sounds corny. When was the last time you reintroduced yourself to you, to genuinely know yourself again, without the schedule, the job, the friends, the acquaintances, and the world wide web that we have in our pockets all day long? Sure, maybe you've tapped into yourself once in a while before all this stuff happened in various different ways. But I couldn't help thinking, when are we going to have another opportunity to have this time to just be with ourselves without all the usual distractions, to get to know yourself after years of your personal evolution since the last time we were truly connected with ourselves with little or no effort, which is almost always around the time when we had the least amount of responsibility. Now, getting even more personal, I, like many others, every once in a while just have trouble liking myself, which is one of the heaviest responsibilities. And right now, a lot of us have no choice but to be solely with ourselves during this crisis. Even if you are with families, spouses, significant others, or roommates, all of this has forced us to be mentally, physically, emotionally more intimate with ourselves for long periods of time. I mean, if you can't stand being with yourself for a long period of time, let's just hope we find people in our lives who just can't get enough of us. But you see where I'm getting at. Using the World Wide Web as an example, the beauty of the internet is that it allows us to connect with everyone, the universe, any and all times of the day. That's just the world we live in now. Unfortunately, one of the costs of that is getting further disconnected with ourselves. Now, don't misread me. I am pro-internet. I mean, it's my longest relationship. Why would I digress. So yeah, why not take whatever time you need to catch up with yourself. Examine yourself, work on shortcomings, and give yourself credit where it's due. It all may sound very chicken soup, but nowadays we have no choice but to make mountains of compromises in this life. And in doing so, it's easy to lose ourselves while we're on constant autopilot. Even in leisure, over time, that disconnect has an effect on our mental and emotional health, two parts of ourselves which are critical during times like this, and it affects our sociability. So just like going to the gym, doing a crossword or a Sudoku to keep your mind and body from deteriorating, I was thinking, wouldn't it be cool to take some of this added time and do the same thing for your person? To be bluntly honest with ourselves and getting recentered again builds focus. And when we take care of ourselves in this way, things tend to fall into place, allowing us to tackle and process chaos better. But we have to make that effort. Now, I know it may be easier for someone like me to say that because I don't have a family to support and I live alone. I don't have a television or internet, but it's still a challenge getting self reacquainted and accepting my ever-changing self. And that process will be different for everybody. Whether you write in a journal, talk out loud to yourself, reminisce through old photos or objects, or reconnect with your faith if you have one. I just think it would be a good thing to explore during a time like this. I mean, it's been helpful for me since this started, and I should probably make it a regular thing. It may even positively affect the rest of the things we choose to fill our time with by building up our mental and emotional stamina. Now, disclaimer, take all of this with a healthy grain of common sense. If this kind of mindfulness takes you to unproductive pessimism or pulls you toward a quicksand of dark cerebral mentality, then by all means choose a healthier alternative or tread lightly but keep yourself safe. Otherwise, before you go filling your added time with screens, books, and living room burpees, I encourage you to take a little time to get reacquainted with you. Then, once you caught up with yourself, catch up with family. Revisit abandoned projects, learn a language, and don't avoid yourself. Rest, repair, and be good to you. Netflix isn't going anywhere. Now, I know all of this probably doesn't apply to those who are still working essential jobs, especially government and medical officials, not to mention the doctors and nurses working day and night, putting their actual lives on the line to quite possibly save the world. Whoa. Still, I hope this video encourages you to explore you and the possibilities of this extra time, and to be thankful, especially if you're alive and healthy, and to all those caring for the afflicted and genuinely protecting the rest. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you. As for slowing this pandemic, that responsibility is on the rest of us. We know what to do. Let's do it. We don't want the people who are risking their lives to do it in vain. So, please be safe and good to each other, and let's survive this apocalypse with grace and common sense, shall we? I'm going to start by making some end-of-the-world nachos again. I am hungry. How will you spend your time? Thanks for listening, you guys. Bye. And pretend that I sent this last week.